first hour, we will go through some of the material on anatomy of breathing, and all of us have done the 200-hour program for teachers training, right? So most of this will be a review of what we learned before. I also would like to introduce a few new elements that perhaps we may not have looked at earlier, which is not there in this current slides, but I would like to focus on it because the second hour, 10:30 to 11:30, Eka is going to come and she is going to lead a few practices involving the breath and specifically on the bandhas. How the three bandhas, Muladhara Bandha, Uddiyana Bandha, Jalandhara Bandha, how they affect the physiology and how they affect the internal organs of the abdominal cavity and the thoracic cavity. I'll just mention briefly on that at the end of this presentation, so that when we do the practices with the bandhas, we can appreciate like why we are doing these practices, what happens internally, and how to do them correctly. So in the practical session, we are going to look at three postures where we apply all three bandhas. So according to the system that I mentioned earlier, the Vinyasa Krama system, people are taught the three bandhas in one of the three postures. We are going to see what the three postures are. It's very easy to apply the bandhas in those postures. So that's what we are going to do. And in order to prepare for that, let us understand a little bit about, or review a little bit about the anatomy of respiration. So I've divided this presentation into 4 parts, and the main part we are going to talk about the mechanics of respiration. I hope everyone can see from the back.
Yes.
Okay. You can read. I hope it's not an eye test.
Come in the front rows.
And this presentation will also share with everyone. So the first part of this presentation will be mechanics of respiration. If you model the system just as a mechanical system, in other words, the movements of different parts of the body, how does that happen when we breathe? That's the first part. And the second, briefly we will touch on the control of respiration. What makes us breathe even though we are not deliberately affecting the breath? It happens on its own. So how does that happen? The control of the breath. And also breath can be deliberately controlled as well. It's both under the voluntary and involuntary aspect. So we will see how that works. And then the physiology of respiration, to understand a little bit about the lung volumes. And finally, a little bit on what is pranayama, what is prana, and how the breath and the prana, although people use them interchangeably, they are a little bit different. So as yoga teachers, we should have a clarity on what is prana. Sometimes we define prana as life force, energy, very fuzzy way, right? But precise definition of what is prana we are going to see as well. Okay, so let's begin with the mechanics of respiration. The simplest model that we can think of when we talk about the breath is the movement between two cavities, two enclosed spaces, namely the thoracic cavity and the abdominal cavity. You see the one on the yellow and this one blue. So those two parts of the body, and we can model the breathing as the interrelationship between these two cavities, how they move together, what happens between those two cavities. And it turns out that the mechanical properties of these two cavities are very different. So our breathing is controlled by how the mechanical properties of these two enclosed surfaces, they interact with each other. So let's look at it, what's happening there. The lungs are mostly composed of air. So 50% of the air, even after we exhale fully, 50% of the thoracic cavity is still filled with air. and when we breathe in, 80% of it is filled with air. So the thoracic cavity is mostly air. We can model it that way. It's not so for abdominal cavity. The abdominal cavity, we can model it as mostly fluid. Okay? So we can think of the thoracic cavity as a pneumatic system. It's an air-filled balloon. You can think of it as an air-filled balloon. The abdominal cavity is like a water-filled balloon. Hydraulic system. So pneumatic system versus hydraulic system. So we can think of breathing this way. This is a very nice way to imagine or to model breathing. You'll find this in one of the yoga anatomy books. Perhaps this is one of the most referred yoga anatomy books by Leslie Kaminoff. He says, breathing, the process of taking air into and expelling it from the lungs, is caused by a three-dimensional shape change. Very important, three-dimensional shape change in the thoracic and abdominal cavities. The shape of these two cavities, the enclosed surfaces, they change. Now, if you take a deep breath in, clearly we need more space to hold the air. In other words, we need more space in the lungs to accommodate the in-breath. Clearly we are increasing the volume of the thoracic cavity, right? It's obvious. But the abdominal cavity does not change volume. The volume is the same, but the shape changes. So when you look at these two cavities, the thoracic cavity both changes volume and shape, whereas the abdominal cavity changes only shape. It does not change in volume. So that is the fundamental difference between these two cavities. It's clear, right? Yeah.
So then when we breathe in, won't the abdominal cavity get compressed?
Yes.
So the volume changes, right? Maybe it's under
Shape
pressure.
changes, but not the volume. Unless we are eating, right? We are consuming a lot of food and expanding the belly. But we are talking about just breathing here. The volume doesn't change, the shape changes. It's like a water-filled balloon. If you apply pressure from one side, the water-filled balloon will bulge from some other place, but the total volume is the same. Because fluid is not compressible. I mean, for a small degree, if you really want to look at the micro change in volume, yes. But air is more compressible. Fluid is far less compressible. So this is the very important thing to keep in mind. This shape change, yeah.
I don't think even air is being compressed or anything here, right?
It's not
more
compressed.
of less and more air.
Exactly. That's a very good point. In fact, we know that the air gushes into the system because there is a pressure gradient, right? There's a lower pressure in the lungs. And then the air gushes in. It's not that we are trying to grab air molecules from outside. No, we're just creating space and it creates a low pressure and the air gushes in. That differential pressure is very tiny. I think it's 760 mm mercury, right? The atmosphere, the pressure, 760, if I remember correctly. So the difference in pressure, when we breathe in, the pressure gradient is only 3 mm mercury. In other words, it's 760 outside, 757 inside. The pressure gradient is very tiny. So it's just the volume that changes. The pressure, not so much.
In the thorax, correct?
Yes, in the thoracic cavity. By the way, this is a very interesting, as yoga teachers, it's a principle for us to know. I'm sidetracking a little bit, but I'm a big fan of Patanjali. So let me mention this one. He says about breathing. Breathing is something that happens by creating space and the air will fill it. There's a sutra called Parinama Prakriti Apurat. Prakriti means the nature will fill. Apurat, it will fill it. This principle can be applied not just for breath, but for anything in life. If you want to do something, don't try to hammer it and try to put a lot of force. Create space and then let the nature fill it in for you. In other words, if you want to make a lot of money, then don't try to grab here and there. That's the steya, right? The opposite of asteya. What Patanjali says is, make yourself maybe educate or do something so that the money will come to you, like that, to give a very
Create a demand.
yes, in other words, create the space and the nature will fill it for you. That's exactly what's happening in our breathing. Okay, so this shape change is controlled by the thoracic diaphragm. When we talk about the diaphragm, usually we refer to the thoracic diaphragm. There's also a pelvic diaphragm, and there's also, I think, diaphragm in the throat region. But usually when we refer only to the thoracic, only the word diaphragm, we refer to this thoracic diaphragm. And there are other accessory muscles, like the intercostal muscles, the abdominal muscles, and even some of the clavicular muscles. When we do the sectional breathing, when we do the third stage, the sectional breathing, we're actually using some of the muscles of the near the clavicle. So inhalations can take place only as a result of muscular activity. Exhalations are different. What does it mean? If the muscles are all totally relaxed, if the diaphragm is totally relaxed, that means we have exhaled fully. That's why our last act in this life, just before we depart the body, is to breathe out. That's what they do before people die, right? Nobody takes a deep breath in and dies. The last act of life is breathing out. So first act of life is breathing in and crying. The last act of life is breathing out and make other people cry. That's what Kabir says in one of the poems that he wrote. So when the muscles are all completely relaxed, when the diaphragm is totally relaxed, that means we have breathed out fully. When we engage the diaphragm, that means we breathe in, and we are going to see how this movement happens. We are going to use some hand gestures, some mudras, to see how the thoracic diaphragm moves and the different types of breathing. The first and the second types of the sectional breathing, we will see what is different between the movements of the diaphragm and the abdominal cavity. Okay, the lungs have the capacity to get smaller because the elasticity keeps pulling them along with the rib cage to a smaller size. So what this means is that when everything is relaxed, then we breathe out fully. In order to breathe in, we need to contract the muscle, the main muscle, which is the diaphragm, the thoracic diaphragm. It's clear so far, right? Okay. So let's look at the diaphragm. So what you see as green here, in my laptop, it shows as red. So we have to imagine that it's red. So this is the diaphragm. And basically, the main engine of respiration is this muscle, this very important muscle, the thoracic diaphragm. When we examine the shape of this diaphragm, we can, many images come to mind. It resembles the shape of a jellyfish, it resembles the shape of a parachute. Perhaps we can even think of an umbrella. It resembles the shape of an umbrella. So those are the ways in which we can think of the shape of the diaphragm. In fact, it's a double dome because it contours the forms of the internal organs that lie around it. So the heart is here, the liver is here, and so on. So it contours the internal organs that surround it. Yes?
So is this the shape at the time of when I'm completely exhaled? Also.
That's a good question. I don't know. So this is just a general outline of the diaphragm. I would say this is after exhale. But we will see, even inhalation, there are different types of inhalation. This could also model a certain type of inhalation.
What do you mean by double dome? Are there two umbrellas?
No, it's just the same a sheet of muscle, but you see two curves here. It's not just one curve. Okay, so the diaphragm is a dome sheet of combined muscle and tendon. Tendon.
I have one question.
Yes.
So those two, there's diaphragm, you said two,
The whole thing is a diaphragm.
so there are two, correct?
Yes.
Like two hills,
Yes.
I mean, not a hill, or whatever.
Actually, the second one is not really a prominent.
So it's not like one like dome.
It's not one dome because it contours the shape of
And
the
because-
internal organ. Okay. So, because this is a thin sheet, its shape bears the impressions of its immediate surroundings, the rib cage, the heart, the lungs, and the abdominal organs, and it is dependent on the existence and anatomical arrangements of these structures for its function. By the way, there is one principle in yoga, namely, the form and the function are very interrelated. In other words, if any organ, any internal organ gets displaced from its intended position, then it will affect the functioning of that organ. For example, if the heart starts sagging because of lack of exercise, because of age, and when it's displaced from its original or the intended position, then it does not function in its peak form. So when we do postures or when we do exercises like the Shirasasana, the Sarvangasana, Viparita Karani Mudra, any inversions that will bring the organs back to its place. So we are helping the organs function in their peak form. That's called Kaya Indra Siddhi in Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. Kaya Indri Siddhi. So to make the organs function in their peak form, make sure that they are in the right place. It's like if you take a machine and you say, okay, the engine of my car, I don't like it here, I want to take it somewhere else. It's not going to function in the peak form. So they have to be in the right place. Okay. Also, you will see that the rim of the diaphragm, that is the perimeter of the diaphragm, is connected to the base of the rib cage. And it is also, you see these two legs, right, of the diaphragm, they are attached to the lumbar segment between L1 and L4 of this vertebrae. So the circumference attaches to the rib cage, and these two legs, which are, you can think of as the other end of the parachute, is connected to the lumbar segment. Okay. So let's examine a little bit more of the diaphragm. Again, you have to imagine that this is red color. So we can divide the diaphragm into three segments or three different parts. The first is the central part, which you see in the white color. It is called the central tendon. The central tendon. In fact, central tendon doesn't have a dome. It's like a flat, solid piece. It's like a piston. You can think of it like a piston. It's a central tendon, which is much firmer than the muscular part outside. So tendon, as you know, connects muscle to a bone. This is one of the few tendons that connect muscle to muscle. In fact, there's only one muscle that surrounds it, which is the remainder of the diaphragm. There is no attachment to any bone to this central tendon. So this whole white part is the central tendon. The central tendon forms the top surface of the dome, which floats there freely, attached only to the muscle fibers of the costal and crural portions. So the costal portion is the second part, which is the green part, the main part of the diaphragm, and the crural part are the legs. Crura means legs. The two legs of the diaphragm that attach to the lumbar segment of the spine. So it is the only tendon, this white part is the only tendon in the body which does not attach directly to the bones of the skeleton. So it looks like this is the only tendon that has only muscular connection. There is no connection to any bone of the skeletal system. And then the largest part of the diaphragm is the costal portion, whose muscle fibers fan down. So the fibers of the thoracic diaphragm are radial. They fan out from the central tendon to the rib cage. And then the crural portion of the diaphragm consists of the right crus and the left crus, so the two legs, the right and left legs, which attach to the forward arch of the lumbar spine. So along the lumbar spine, there is a what they call the secondary arch. So these attachments are at the place where the secondary arch is there. Okay.
So Shriramji, if you have any lumbar issues, right, like some people can get herniated, whatever, then that will affect the diaphragm?
Yes. We will see some of the postures later, how we can influence the breathing using the exercises for the lumbar spine. Okay, Few other things to note here is you will see many of these openings and they have to permit the flow. For example, this big opening here is for the main vein from the lower extremities to carry the deoxygenated blood back to the heart. This is called the inferior vena cava. Inferior vena cava. So all the veins of the lower extremities, they just like the tributaries of a river, they collect the water together and they form bigger and bigger veins, and this is the main vein from the lower extremities that flows the deoxygenated blood back to the heart. Like that we have a superior vena cava as well. There are two vena cavas. But there's only one aorta that sends the oxygenated blood into the systemic circulation. But there are two vena cava that flow the deoxygenated blood back to the heart. So this opening is for the inferior vena cava. So this is the structure of the diaphragm. The architecture of the diaphragm permits it to move the central tendon of the dome. It can move the base of the rib cage. It can also access the lumbar segment of the spine. There are 3 degrees of freedom. Usually when we think of a muscle, there is a point of insertion and a point of origin. Origin and insertion. Origin is the place where the muscle attaches itself to the stable point of the joint, right? The insertion is the place where it attaches itself to the mobile part of the joint. So depending on which is stable, which is mobile, we label one end as the insertion, the other end as the origin, right?
Can you repeat it, please? Yeah.
So let's take an example.
Yeah.
Suppose we consider the bicep, right? When we contract the bicep, that means we are lifting the forearm, correct? We are lifting the forearm. Now, you can think which is the mobile part and which is the insertion. Now, insertion is the mobile part and the origin is the mobile part. So, this end of the bicep, which is attached to the shoulder, which is not moving, so that will be the origin, and the other end will be the insertion that makes the
Move.
joint move,
Move.
that makes the joint mobile. It's clear, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, sometimes depending on the movement, they can change places. In one movement, the origin insertion pair could be different from in another movement, but let's not go into that. Here, there are 3 points of attachment. That means, which is insertion and which is origin, there are 3C2 or 6 combinations. There's so many different ways because you have the central tendon and then you have the rim and then you have the crural attachments, right? So there are different ways in which you can keep one of them mobile, the other 2 can move. And there are so many combinations possible, right? Therefore, there are so many types of breathing. There are many, there's a rich variety of ways in which we can breathe. So it's because there are so many degrees, 3 degrees of freedom that we have for the thoracic diaphragm. So 3 degrees of freedom. And that's why the process of respiration is so rich and so deep. Okay.
Shriram, can you show us like approximately where it is, the diaphragm of the, like can you just point
Like when
to-
you see the lower edge of the rib cage,
Mhm.
so that's the place where the circumference of the diaphragm is there, and this crural part.
Mhm.
People are actually surprised, but first time when they discover where it is exactly, all the way down in the lumbar segment of the spine, where the lower that curvature is. So when we lie down, for example,
Mhm.
usually the lumbar segment of the spine will be slightly raised from the ground. So it's in that segment, L1 and L4. That's where
Yeah,
these 2 are attached.
and it was pretty low,
Yeah, it's pretty low.
so yeah, I'm surprised.
Yeah, and most people have L4 and L5 problems.
Lower back problem
Yeah.
is a common concern, and no wonder the breathing also could be
Yeah.
compromised.
Right.
You will see little later like how we can engage the breathing using the exercises for the lower back. We'll come to that in a moment.
So would you say the muscles have the origin at the lumbar or the thoracic?
What is origin is the stable part, and what is the insertion is the mobile part.
Right. So in this case, wouldn't the origin be on the lumbar?
It depends.
vertebrae?
If the lumbar is moving, we are going to see some postures in which the lumbar spine will move.
Jyoti Sabu was talking, right? The insertion and origin is just more of a concept and it can
Exactly.
be interchanged depending on the situation.
All right.
To give a very simple example, when we do the seated forward bend, so you're sitting down and bending forwards, right? Now the trunk is mobile, legs are stable. Whereas if we lie down and we do the leg raising postures, the situation is reversed. The trunk is stable, the legs are mobile. So the muscle which is responsible for this movement, which is one of the muscles, is the psoas muscle. So the psoas muscle, it alternates between which is insertion and which is origin. So it's more of a label for that particular movement. Okay. And there are some accessory muscles also. In addition to the diaphragm, we also have the intercostal muscles, which are, there's the external and the internal intercostal muscles, which you can think of as the continuation of one set of abdominal muscles, namely the external and internal obliques. So the fibers of these muscles are striated diagonally. So the internal and external intercostal muscles, the striations are orthogonal, they're perpendicular to each other, but both of them are diagonal. And what they do, so when you contract these muscles, what happens is it will allow the rib cage either to open up or fold down. So one of the models that we saw for the diaphragm is the umbrella model, right? Just like when you open an umbrella, it fans out, and when you close the umbrella, it falls in. This movement is facilitated by the intercostal muscles.
Intercostal muscles are the muscles that attach
To the rib cage. Yes,
And there are two layers, one is
Yes.
internal and one is external.
exactly. In fact, if you extend the obliques from the core, obliques are part of the core muscles, so when you extrapolate them, you reach the intercostal muscles.
Then follow that. What do you mean by oblique muscles?
Obliques are, so in the core, there are 4 layers of muscles, starting with outermost rectus abdominis, and then you have the external and internal obliques, and the deep core muscles are the transverse abdominis. So the mid section, which is the internal and external obliques, if you extrapolate them, you will reach the intercostal muscles. You can actually model that as one sheet of muscle. It's all connected. In fact, it's also connected to some muscles of the lower extremities as well. In fact, even the diaphragm is actually connected to the psoas muscle. There is no point of distinction. It's like, let me see, the border between Canada and US is man-made, right? So like that, the border between the or Mexico I wanted to say, but let me not say that. Wall and all that. There's no wall here, so it's all one sheet of muscle, and we just say this part is the diaphragm and this part is the psoas, but it's all one big muscle. The diaphragm and the psoas are actually connected. You can think of it as one unit actually.
This is SWAS.
Psoas, P-S-O-A-S. Psoas.
P-H-O-S.
P-S-O-A-S.
Is a muscle?
Yeah. I haven't shown it here, but in one of the future sessions we will look into it. What is the psoas? Okay. And these are some of the other accessory muscles. In fact, this is just what I described. This is the transverse abdominis, which is the core muscle, the deepest core muscle, and the most superficial core muscle, the rectus abdominis. And then we have the internal and external obliques. Now, why are these important for breathing? Because they seem to be in the lower trunk, but they are still important because, remember, when we do this shape change for breathing, when we want to bulge the belly out, when we are doing the abdominal breathing, a section 1 pranayama, then if these muscles are held tight, especially this transverse abdominis, if a tightening, chronic contraction of this muscle will not allow the belly to bulge, right? So we're interfering with the process of respiration. These muscles should relax in order to accommodate the abdominal breathing. So thoraco-abdominal, the abdomino-diaphragmatic breathing. We're going to see that in a moment. In order to bulge the belly, this muscle should be relaxed. Okay. So we are going to spend a couple of minutes in this slide, very important slide. The two types of breathing. So this is what differentiates between the sectional breathing 1 and 2. Sectional breathing 1 and 2. What you see on the left side is the sectional breathing 1, where we bulge the belly. Sometimes when we say expand the belly, that is actually inaccurate, because remember, the abdominal cavity cannot change in volume, it changes only shape. So when we say expand, it gives the notion of something increasing in volume. So rather than saying expanding, a more accurate way to say that is to bulge the belly out. Bulge the belly out. That's what happens in the abdomino-diaphragmatic breathing. The other part, the sectional breathing 2, is the thoraco-diaphragmatic breathing. There, the in-breath is accommodated by the expansion of the thoracic cavity. Of course, the thoracic cavity, the volume expands in the first case also, but here there is a visible change. In this case of the belly breathing, there is no visible change, but how can it change volume? Quiz.
The diaphragm
Yes,
is down.
yes, the diaphragm, you're pulling down the
Yes.
diaphragm.
Exactly. So it's like a piston. Internally, the diaphragm moves down. So the volume increases to accommodate more air. But you don't see that movement from outside, because the diaphragm is hidden. It's inside, right? So you don't see the chest breathing. Although the volume increase takes place there, you see the change only in the bulge of the belly. In the belly breathing. In this case, the thoraco-diaphragmatic breathing, what happens is that volume change in the thoracic cavity is made visible by opening that umbrella. And that is done by the intercostal muscle. It makes sense, right? Okay. So, what is the technical difference between these two? How does the diaphragm behave differently in these two scenarios? Let's start with the belly breathing. Okay, here what we are doing is, the rim of the diaphragm is stationary. Do you agree? We are not fanning out the umbrella. The circumference of the diaphragm is stable, it's stationary. We are just moving the piston. Right? So the circumference is stationary. The rim of the diaphragm is stationary. Whereas the central tendon, which is the center part of that piston, it moves down. Right? Whereas on the other type of breathing, which is the thoraco-diaphragmatic breathing, what happens is that the rim of the diaphragm is mobile. It opens up like an umbrella, whereas the central tendon is stationary. So I'm going to demo how it looks like, okay? And then we are also going to do it together. Imagine that my right hand is the diaphragm, so it's a dome. And imagine, so this is the abdominal wall, okay? Now, when I do belly breathing, that means the section 1
Can you step to the
pranayama.
right so the light is on you?
Oh.
Okay.
It's okay? It's visible?
Yes.
Okay. So in the first type of breathing, what happens is, like a piston, it moves down and the belly bulges. So this is inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale. It's easy, right? Now, for the second type of breathing, what happens? The belly doesn't move. So this arm, the left hand is going to be stationary. The breathing happens like this. You see the difference? The circumference of the diaphragm changes. It becomes bigger when we breathe in, and then the circumference becomes smaller when we breathe out. So this is the difference. So the first case is like this. The circumference doesn't change, it just moves forwards and we bulge the belly and breathe out. Breathe in and breathe out. In the other case, this hand is stationary and we change the circumference like this.
Genius.
See the difference?
Very,
It's like an umbrella. It
Yeah.
fans out. And in our regular breathing, it's usually a combination, a mix of some of this and some of that. Shall we try this together?
Yes. Sure.
Question.
Can you also show us what happens in Kapalabhati breath?
Kapalabhati is totally different from this because which muscle is engaged in Kapalabhati? Quiz. Abdomen is correct, yes. But which of the abdominal muscles? We saw 4 abdominal muscles. The deep one.
The
yes,
deep one.
which is the transverse abdominis. Transverse abdominis, we engage that in practices such as Kapalabhati. Whenever there's forceful exhalation, it engages the transverse abdominis, Kapalabhati, or even blowing a birthday candle. We are using that muscle. And the best way to strengthen that muscle, to strengthen the deep core muscle, namely the transverse abdominis, is which exercise do you think is the most effective for strengthening the deep abdominal muscle?
Plank.
Plank, yes, plank. And the variations of the plank, like the Chaturanga Dandasana that we did today. And if you want even deeper experience, more strength building, then you can raise one leg.
Oh.
You can take one arm forwards, do 4-arm plank for 1 minute. In our teacher training program with Ramaswamy, we did that. We thought, oh, plank must be very easy. And each second that we had to hold longer was like one big, oh my God, I had to hold it for a few more hours. So plank is a posture which appears very easy from outside. But when we do it, we realize, oh my God, I need strength here. So many muscles that I never knew existed suddenly surface into our awareness. So plank is the best posture to strengthen the deep abdominal muscles. Let's try this movement. Let's identify which of the 2 hands is our right hand. And let's bring the right hand on top like this, like a dome, which is going to model our diaphragm. Okay? Now, the left hand is like this. It's going to model the abdominal wall. You can think of this as the transverse abdominis, like a little belt. Now, for the abdomino-diaphragmatic breathing, namely the sectional breathing number 1, what we're doing is, we are simply lowering the right hand and the left hand bulges out. So this is what happens when we breathe in. So when we breathe out, the right hand comes up and the left hand moves closer to the spine. And let's do this a few times. So this is breathing in and this is breathing out. Breathing in and breathing out. It's clear, right?
So you are breathing to the lower part of your lungs, is that correct?
When we look at the lungs, remember it's a pneumatic system. That means the air that flows into the lungs, the air pressure that it exerts on the boundary, in the walls of the lungs, is equally distributed. It's like when you put air in a tire, when you fill it from one side of the tire, it's not that all the air is going only filling that part. It's going to distribute itself throughout the tire. That's the property of the fluid, whether it's water or air. The pressure is going to be equally distributed everywhere. So the difference here is that the bulge happens because of the abdominal cavity. It's the squishy water-filled balloon. So that's what bulges out. Let's try the second type of breathing, thoraco-abdominal breathing. So the hands in the same position. The right hand is the thoracic diaphragm, like a dome. The left hand models the abdominal wall. Now, the left hand is going to be stationary because we are just going to do chest breathing. The abdominal wall is going to be stationary. And the movement happens by the dome becomes less of a dome, it becomes more flat as you breathe in. And as you breathe out, it starts becoming like a dome again. So it flattens out as you breathe in, and dome again as you breathe out. Flattens, breathing in, and as you breathe out, we see the dome again. So this is what happens in the thoraco-diaphragmatic breathing.
Where does clavicle fit into this whole thing?
Oh, clavicle are accessory muscles. So when we talk about the third type of the sectional breathing, we are also engaging the clavicular muscles. What the clavicle muscles do is to pull the umbrella up. It doesn't open the umbrella, it will pull the umbrella higher.
So when you just open it up like that.
Yes. And by the way, if you look at anatomy of breathing, the books that talk about all this physiology of breathing, if someone uses only clavicular breathing, in other words, the chest is not moving, the belly is not moving, only part that is moving is the clavicle up and down, that means they are in a high stress situation. They are going through some anxiety, or because they are contracting the abdominal wall, they are also contracting the intercostal muscles. So the only place where they are allowing breath is the clavicle. So the umbrella is going up and down. So
Can I just
Yeah.
add a few points? You can correct me if I'm wrong. From what I have read, 60 to 70% of the respiration happens at the lower lobes of the lungs. 20-25% happens at the middle lobes, that is the thoraco-diaphragmatic breathing, and for the upper lobes, only about 4 to 7% of the air and the respiration can happen. So this is, again, correct me, right? The idea behind we asking everybody to do the lower lobes, that is abdomino-diaphragmatic breathing, is because it's so much more easier to breathe and get more oxygen than the other two lobes. Whereas people with high stress like asthma, right, they try to breathe clavicular breathing. They will be like that. They are doing that, right? That is the asthma, and we will be soon teaching you how to train them with chair, holding the chair, and how to give them, bring them down. So they are breathing like that, and it's a positive feedback, that loop. That is, they are breathing using the upper lobes of the lungs, but then that is only going to make it worse for them because they are getting less oxygen, and that means so much more again. The same thing will continue because that increases the stress, and so they go on doing that until they really need some either medications or they collapse, right? So steroids and stuff like that. But if we really taught them belly breathing during the attack they are not ready to do belly breathing. They will think that they have to do this, but actually it's worse. So if you taught them to relax and follow the belly breathing, the episode of asthma itself can come down because they got more oxygen. It's just a interesting positive loop they are into. They got this problem, so they stopped belly breathing. They stopped belly breathing, that only makes it worse. So this is the loop that we have to break. So teaching them belly breathing, both asthmatics as well as epilepsy attack. Even same thing happens with the epileptics. They know that they are getting into the seizure, and they shut down their belly breathing and they continue with thoracic, and even worse, the clavicular breathing. So then the seizure symptoms are only going to get worse because now they stopped. The oxygen is even lesser. They seize because some parts of the brain doesn't get oxygen, and so they make it worse for themselves. So children who are taught belly breathing regularly, and also especially to teach them awareness of attack when the attack comes, and if they learn to relax and do belly breathing, they can more or less come out of asthma or epilepsy, or the symptoms can be much lower.
And in fact, one of the reasons why it's a good idea to exercise the clavicular breathing also, if we want to make full use of our lung capacity, we need all three. You can think of it as a pyramid. So the base of the pyramid that contains most of the volume is in the abdominal cavity. And then the midsection of the pyramid is the thoracic cavity. And then close to the clavicle, the top of the lungs is the apex of the pyramid. It cannot accommodate more air, but if you really want to use 100% of the capacity of the lungs, we need to engage all three types of breathing.
So Shriramji,
Yeah.
back to my question about Kapalabhati. So is there anything happening to the diaphragm at that point?
All breathing happens to that because of
Okay.
the diaphragm.
So what's happening then? So it's you're
So
pulling.
when we push the
Uh-huh.
abdomen in, the abdominal wall in because of
Yeah.
contracting the
Right,
transverse abdominis muscle,
right.
that means, remember when the diaphragm relaxes,
Mhm.
we breathe out.
Yeah.
Here we are not just relaxing, we are
Yeah.
forcefully, we
Yeah.
are pushing the diaphragm up by creating that pressure from the water-filled balloon.
Right.
So it's a forced exhalation.
So then is it going?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
I have a question here. I think, I don't know if everybody's breathing normal, maybe I'm not, because we have, as kids, they breathe normal, correct? And over time we learn not to breathe properly.
Yes.
So I mean, is that the belly breathing or?
Kids do nice belly breathing.
Belly
Yeah.
When you
yes.
observe the belly, it's just like a balloon, goes up and down nicely there.
So how
Yeah.
we
Amazing.
forget, correct? to breathe?
Because why do you think we forgot that? Because of sedentary habits and also because of lifestyle, because of chronic stress and so forth.
So we have to learn to do belly breathing all
It
the
helps.
time.
It helps because we are going to engage more of the lung capacity. Now, different traditions of yoga have different ways in which they suggest to do breathing. So there are some styles where they actually tense the abdominal wall so that they encourage more of the chest breathing. But there are only some styles like that. But here, for our purpose, when we do the sectional breathing, we are actually engaging all three. One by one, we are doing all three. Yeah.
How would you be able to do abdomino-diaphragmatic breathing in Jalandhar Bandha though? Iyengar says you should keep your abdomen intact and practice thoraco.
That is an example where in some of the students of Krishnamacharya, they suggest that when we do the postures, keep the belly flat. So when we do Jalandhar Bandha, when we inhale fully, we are actually opening the umbrella a little bit more. Now, if we do the opposite, what is called a paradoxical breathing. In paradoxical breathing, what happens is, when we breathe in, the belly actually collapses. And when we breathe out, it bulges out. Now, in order to compensate for it, the umbrella has to flap even more because the abdominal cavity is doing the opposite movement. You see the point, right?
Yes.
In order to accommodate the breath, it has to move even more. So don't try that. Too much of paradoxical breathing will guaranteed bring anxiety in our mind. So let's not test that. If you read Leslie Kaminow's book, The Yoga Anatomy, you will see more about what is the paradoxical breathing. So what I want to do now is, it's 10:26. I'm just going to show three postures where three different types of breathing are the natural form in that posture. Okay? And then we are going to hand over to Eka, who is going to cover the bandhas and how they are related to the breathing. And I will also do a little bit of intro to bandhas. What happens when we engage the bandhas? How does it affect the respiratory system? And also how does it affect the spine? So let's look at the examples of, if we want the easiest way to do the abdomino-diaphragmatic breathing, it's in the lying down position. In the lying down position, when we lie down, chances are that we are not tensing the abdominal wall. We are not tensing the transverse abdominis. So it is now more amenable to bulge out. We are encouraging the belly breath to happen. So there is more chance that the abdominal diaphragmatic breathing is what happens here. So in this type of breathing, what happens is the costal attachment to the rib cage and the crural attachment to the spine act as stationary origins. What is mobile is the central tendon, which moves like a piston. Okay? So this is the first posture that encourages abdominodiaphragmatic breathing. Now let's look at another example. Unsupported cobra pose. Unsupported. This is called Niralamba Bhujangasana. Niralamba, Alambana means supported. Niralamba means not supported. Here we are not using the hands for support, we are just taking the arms behind. And all the effort to hold this pose is coming from the lower back muscles and also the muscles from the shoulders, shoulder blades, etc. Now, in this posture, you cannot bulge the belly because the belly is resting on the ground. You cannot bulge the belly. So, it has to be some other form of breathing. When we are holding this posture, some other form of breathing has to take over. So, the movement of the central tendon is restricted. You cannot do its piston work. The crural attachments are stabilized. Why are we stabilizing crural attachments? Because we are contracting the lower back muscles. If the lower back muscles were loose, in other words, if they were not contracted, perhaps the crura also could move, the two legs of the diaphragm. But here, we are also tightening the lower back muscles. So the only mobile part, as far as the system of respiration, the diaphragm is concerned, is that fanning out, the umbrella part. So the rib cage becomes the insertion. So you see this movement. This movement. That's what happens in the unsupported cobra. Okay? And there's one more posture. By the way, you see, when we try to hold this pose, you will notice it's very difficult to hold it stationary. The body will bob up and down. And all the effort to lift the body a few millimeters and come back down is exerted by the diaphragm. If you want to exercise this muscle, the diaphragm, this is a good exercise. Just like when we do push-ups, it exercises, strengthens the triceps, right? Like that, this exercise strengthens the diaphragm, the primary muscle of respiration. And then in this posture, this is an example where the lower back is relaxed. You cannot do belly bulging because again, it's in contact with the ground. And we are also placing the chest on the ground. It cannot open up like an umbrella, right? So the only place that can go up and down is the lower back, which is the crural end of the diaphragm. So it's the lower trunk that goes up and down. This is another form of breathing. So in different postures, how we hold the posture will dictate how or which part of the system is mobile and which part of the system is stable. Okay, I'm going to stop here and I just want to segue into the bandhas. In bandhas, what do we do? In the classic form of application of the bandhas, what we do is we engage the three bandhas. All of us are familiar with the three bandhas. So three bandhas we engage at the end of exhalation. We exhale and hold. So after Rechaka, we hold, which is the Bahya Kumbhaka, right? The exhale and hold, which is the Bahya Kumbhaka. And because that's when we can apply the Uddiyana Bandha. Now the Mula Bandha and the Jalandhara Bandha we can apply throughout the practice. But the Uddiyana Bandha can be applied only during breath held out, right? Clearly, it's obvious, otherwise we bulge the belly and to bring it back in, it's not possible. Now, in order to get a deeper experience of Uddiyana Bandha, the way to do that is, of course, to learn, we actually engage the muscles and bring the navel close to the spine. But to give it a more intense feeling and to make that concave effect, you know, we might have seen pictures in yoga books where they do Uddiyana Bandha and the stomach caves in, right? That happens not because of muscular effort. You can do all you want to tighten the transverse abdominis, but it's not going to bring that effect. What creates that effect is when you hold the breath out, you're going to open the umbrella. In other words, you're going to expand the rib cage but you are not breathing. You have kept the breath held out. So we're expanding the volume of the lungs, right? But then, in order to maintain the same pressure, the diaphragm actually moves up. And when the diaphragm moves up, the stomach caves in. You see the point? We are sucking the stomach in rather than trying to push the stomach with muscles. That's a very big difference. And when we do the bandhas, for example, when we do the Jalandhar bandha, what happens is, that's the best way to stretch the spine, especially the thoracic spine. And much of the peripheral nerves that emanate from the spinal cord, they have to emerge out of the space between two vertebrae, intervertebral foramen. From that opening, it has to come out. Now, if that opening is very small, it can pinch the nerve. So, by doing these bandhas, we are actually creating more space. In fact, the Sanskrit word for sukham, the happiness, literally means to create space. Kam means space. Sukham means comfortable space or expansive space. Dukkham means restricted space. That means there is no freedom. We cannot be free. We have to be restricted. So, by lengthening the spine, when we are engaging these bandhas, what we are doing is to create space in the vertebral column. Another thing that we are doing is, we are also providing useful massage, useful pressure to the internal organs, both of the abdominal cavity as well as thoracic cavity. Right? When we engage the bandhas, there is a little more pressure, especially the thoracic cavity, because after doing the Uddiyana bandha, I said the diaphragm goes up, right? It goes up, and then it massages the heart, the muscles of the heart. It's one of the very few practices that can actually directly massage the heart. It's a very powerful practice, and Ramaswamy led a team of researchers like some 15 years back. They actually measured all this. So it puts useful pressure directly to the heart. Okay, with that, let me hand over to Eka. Do you want to break or? Let's go.
I know I see many familiar faces, but I wanted to introduce myself as well.
Anybody doesn't know Eka here?
Vikram.
Except Vikram, I think, yeah, pretty much everybody knows her,
Everybody
right?
does.
She's Shriram's wife, Shriramji's wife, and she's also super yoga teacher, trainer, right? Faculty with a lot of different styles of yoga and everything. With her rich background, she's going to bring the session on bandhas, right? Yeah, bandhas.
So yes, my name is Eka. I'm a registered nurse. I work for Stanford, and also I'm a vinyasa teacher and Pilates teacher as well. I'm a very passionate Ayurvedic student, and a little bit of practice, whatever I have done. Right? So the reason I wanted to start with bandha is based on my personal experience. Your practice will transform if you actually engage your body into bandhas. And I know bandhas is very esoteric term usually when people say bandhas, because actually we don't see those muscles and energetic centers with our eyes. They are inside the body. So it's not outside, it's not something external, it's an experiential feeling. However, it's pretty much used a lot in Pilates as well as in whole yoga. It's considered one of the inner powers of the human body. And when you actually engage the bandhas properly, and I will explain to you in a so simple terms, but just a little bit of advertisements of bandhas, right? Maybe Shriram just said. So when you engage actually your bandhas, your practice becomes light. So you're having a body mechanic control of lightness. Many times my students say, oh my God, you were in the shower, I didn't even hear you. You start walking like a cat. It's just the yoga practice becomes, so your whole body feels lighter. That's the immediate feeling of it. So you know how people walk and you can hear the steps? So people, yogis who practice with bandhas, even Pilates practitioners, they become light, very light. You barely can hear that. That engagement happens. It's not immediate. It takes a couple of years to develop, maybe a couple of months. Also, bandhas are very powerful to create, to support the spine. And my teacher always says, as long as you have a healthy, strong spine, this is your age. So the age is not how many years, how old are you, how healthy is your spine. So by engaging the bandhas, you create a little bit, actually, you engage in the core, but also the core is actually the main muscle which supports the spine, and it creates more, gives more space into the intervertebral discs. And later on, it's going to be so much easier for you to invert, to do all those flyings and inverting everything in the future. So it's very, very important, the foundation, to understand what is bandha. And Ramaswamiji, our teacher, said, forget about all these explanations. Just imagine bandha is squeeze and lift up. So just remember this little term. It's a feeling inside your body of little squeezing and lifting towards the upward direction when you're standing on your feet. Now with inversion it becomes a little bit more confusing because I'm on my hands. So the up and down within the brain, it's very confusing because we, for example, I'm 42 years old. 42 years old, I've been standing on my feet, and now all of a sudden when I invert, my up becomes down, so my brain have difficulty to understanding that. That's why people cannot do inversions. Otherwise, inversions are not difficult. It's just that understanding the brain to understand where is up and where is down, because we are actually upside down. Does it make sense, or it's confusing? So, but let's understand the bandhas from the standing perspective. And I'm gonna use a principle of Pilates to give you a experiential feeling of a bandha, because they have a very easy and physically, you physically can feel it. And then we're gonna use the same principle using Ujjayi breath. How many of you know Ujjayi breath? All of you, right? Inhale and exhale. Okay, so let's do one little test, right? Sit down comfortably and easily with spine erect. And I would like for you, we're gonna chant Om 3 times. We're gonna open officially the session. And I would like for you to start breathing in Ujjayi. I'm gonna go around and I'm gonna listen to your Ujjayi, alright? Alright, so let's sit down in comfortable position with spine erect. Bring your hands into your heart center. Take a long deep breath in and long deep breath out. Inhale. Inhale. normal deep breath out. And let's start breathing with Ujjayi. Inhale and exhale. Alright, take one more deep breath in. Exhale and open your eyes. So there were a couple of you who had problems with Ujjayi. Maybe Ashwinji will address that, especially on inhale. But that's okay. We will address this, later on. There are a couple of students who have Ujjayi is not, I think, misunderstood a little bit, right? But I think, Ashwinji, you have a session on Ujjayi after this? Or
We have a session on pranayama, yes.
on pranayama, not on
Ujjayi
Ujjayi?
is part of that.
It's part of
Yeah.
it, Ujjayi, right? Yeah. Okay, so never mind.
Actually, it's okay if you correct.
If I correct,
Yeah,
yeah?
and it's,
Are you
I
sure?
hope nobody minds pointing.
No, it's good.
You know,
No,
they are
it's
making
good.
mistake, they
Yeah.
need to know.
Yeah.
It's okay,
Yeah.
nobody will get offended, yes.
Yeah, no, I'm not gonna point, but we're just gonna do Ujjayi breath.
So you
Uh,
can tell us, because otherwise how will we learn? So
Yeah.
we all are
Yeah.
students here, so
It's a advanced group, so it's not like
We
a
not
teacher
mind,
training.
yeah. It's
We
a happy
left our
exercise.
egos outside.
Yeah.
Pleasant to learn.
We'll do it together as a group. So, Ujjayi is breathing through the throat, and majority of you have a very good exhale Ujjayi. But where I see a problem, couple of you also exhale Ujjayi was not happening. But inhale was, this is where I did not hear a smooth Ujjayi. So our teacher used to say Ujjayi needs to be, so there are stages of Ujjayi. Just like everything in yoga, it's always improvement in dance or in music. So one is to have a loud, gross Ujjayi. The next one is to be inhale and exhale of Ujjayi to be equal and to be so subtle like a hissing of a cobra, meaning it needs to sound like a wave of an ocean, which is absolutely okay, but you know, we are having lifestyles and you know, it does express through the breath. But let's try to practice how to do ujjayi on inhale actually, right? So this is where I noticed a little bit of struggle was. So in other words, the ujjayi on exhale was good, was strong, but the inhale was not even. It was like so that kind of thing. And a couple of people did not even have ujjayi and inhale or exhale. So let's go over it because it's really important for the bandha sake. Yeah? So, and you know this technique, Ashwin knows this. So imagine that you have a mirror in front of you, right? You have a mirror in front of you, and you try to make a mist in the mirror, like, now inhale. Do you feel the sensations in your throat, right? Now try to close the mouth and do the inhale again with ujjayi. And exhale through the mouth. Yeah, because we inhale so many times, right? So that, now let's try one more time. Close the eyes and let's do it again. So by knowing this information, just see how you can increase a little bit the intensity of the inhale, like that, without opening the mouth. Yeah? Let's try it again. You can relax the arm, just enjoy you can place them on your knees. Yeah? Let's try it one more time. Inhale. Very good, and let's open the eyes. Very nice, that was very good.
Can I have one question?
Yeah.
When you do that breathe in, the eyes go to this forehead.
This is a different type of, for now,
So I just wanted to see if
Without
I
the
was doing
mudra.
correctly because I
Yeah.
focus on the forehead.
yeah, this is, I think it's one of the meditation practices also to focus the energy. For now, just for the purpose of this class, just observing the breath, because there are different techniques, and because I work for the ophthalmology department, you know, that's strabismus. I'm like, you know, I don't want to teach something which can cause, you know, like extreme, you know. Just observe your breath, that will be. But if you practice it, you have a guru who taught you this thing, you know, you can follow that. But just to be on the safe side, you know, just the breath. So now, very good, Ujjayi. Now I want to teach just a little bit of Pilates breath. And the reason is for you to feel actually how powerful is the breath if engaging a bandha or engaging the core, at least the lower part of the bandha, right? So in Pilates, do you remember what Shriram was saying about the diaphragmatic breath? So just for the purpose of this exercise, we're gonna do this. So in Pilates, what they do, they bulge the belly by blowing the air out. So it's sniffing and then exhaling by pulling the belly in. So when we're gonna sniff, we're gonna balloon the belly. When we're gonna exhale, we're gonna pull the belly in, but everything happens through the mouth, just for the purpose of experience of bandha. And please forget after that the breath through the mouth, because yoga is not through the mouth, yoga is through the nose, but then the same feeling I want you to experience with Ujjayi. It's just a little bit easier to explain with the mouth open to begin with. So I'm gonna demonstrate for you. So imagine the diaphragm is like a, did you show this, Shriram?
Yeah.
He showed, right? Like a little, so when I'm inhaling, right, the diaphragm goes down. When I'm exhaling, the diaphragm goes up. So when I'm sniffing, like how you sniff something, right? Now, you sniff through the nose. Now I'm gonna sniff through the mouth. So now I'm sniffing through the nose and blowing through the mouth, right? Does it make sense? It's a little bit confusing. So when I'm sniffing in, my belly goes out, and when I'm blowing out, my belly goes in. This is the confusion part. Just please kind of understand. Let's try it a couple of times. Place your hand, left hand on your belly. Now sniff through the nose 3 times. Balloon the belly. Now open the mouth. Pull the belly in, right? Makes sense? Let's do it again. Very good, right? So we all got it. So when we're sniffing the breath, the belly goes out. When we're exhaling through the mouth, belly goes in. Now, yeah?
So when you're sniffing, you are just inhaling, there is no time to
Inhaling,
exhale.
yeah, just short breath inhales.
Yeah.
It's not a long inhale, not Ujjayi, just through the nose. We're not using the throat, just the nasal passage, right? So now, I want you to sit down in Vajrasana if you can. If that's not comfortable, you can sit in Sukhasana. And place your third and index on your lower belly, just below the belly button, right? Just below the belly button. But I want you to feel your muscles, like it's quite a little bit of pressure. Not too much pressure, but it's not like just simply placing. You feel your muscles, right? And let's do the breath again now. Sniffing, balloon the belly. And relax. Now I want you to pay attention this time. Maybe all of you noticed it when we are actually exhaling and pulling, something is contracting here. Did you feel the contraction?
Yes.
This is the bandha. This is how engagement of the bandha is happening. Now in Pilates, they use the breath out, which is because it's a short practice to engage the core. They're all talking about this powerhouse and stuff, but this is nothing else than a bandha from a yogic tradition. However, yogis went a step up because they say that it's not so beneficial to blow through the mouth for some reason. So they're doing the same one but with Ujjayi, which is a little bit more advanced and a little bit more body and breath control. But this is how you can, in other words, my whole point is to tell you that as much as possible, use the breath, the Ujjayi breath in your practice will help you to engage your body tremendously. And then we'll go also into the physical aspect, meaning through the muscular. But the breath is really, really the key of engaging your core. If you want to engage your core in a simple yoga exercise, it doesn't matter if you lift your arm up or down or simple exercise. If you're using a breath by engaging the bandha, you are already did amazing high quality practice. And this exercise only show you how powerful is the breath. For any kind of core strengthening or spine lengthening, whatever exercise, it's always fundamental is the breath with engagement, because the breath goes all the way there and engages the whole powerhouse. And we as the embryo, we were actually a core, and from the core all the limbs came out. So body is anatomically, what we learn here in anatomy is dissecting, but actually body is one unit. There is no such thing that heart is not connected to the lung. Always one unit only. The whole system is one, but for us to understand, we need to separate it and dissect. So let's do it one more time, is with a little bit more awareness how much core is engaging just by blowing out, right? Again, press it a little bit harder and find it just below your pubic bone and above your belly button, just right there, okay? And let's do it again. Now keep your fingers where they are, and let's do this with Ujjayi, right? Now, and see how can you engage with Ujjayi breath. The same, I want you to feel the same feeling, the same engagement that you felt on exhale, but using Ujjayi, all right? So let's close the eyes, inhale, balloon the belly if needed, exhale through the nose, Ujjayi. And get the same engagement, see what is needed in your body. Ujjayi. Same engagement. And open your eyes. How many of you felt the engagement with Ujjayi? Yeah. So this is how your practice should be if you want to engage the bandhas. And again, it doesn't matter if you do a simple salutation, or you do inversion, or you do a complex posture. If you're able to control your body and your breath, to engage that part, which is the basic foundation, your quality or your practice will go way higher. It does not matter how simple is the exercise.
Ekachi, so was this the Mula or a variation of it?
So this is bandhas, yes. This is you have the root bandha, this is the root bandha.
So,
and the Uddiyana bandha is a little bit higher.
so my understanding for the root bandha was that you engage 3 sets of muscles, so not just abdominal but pelvic floor.
Yeah.
And so are we doing that as well?
That one will do. So basically for Mula Bandha, in order, so this is just to experience the muscles of the stomach because it's easier. So it's a tactile. And this is the root chakra, but then when you do the Mula Bandha, the actual by the Hatha Yoga Pratipika, right? The Bandha, what they explain is draw the rectum, squeeze the rectum and draw it up. But in order to do that, you're gonna have to engage this muscle as well.
Yes.
So in other words, this is also engagement of like additional to the breath. But
Yes.
what my point is, not many people can constantly squeeze it and do it. It's like a lot of things, but at least with the breath you can engage it, right?
Yeah.
It's like a simplified version of it. But and the next one is adding on and on and on. It just is just a experiential feeling, because bandhas otherwise are very abstract. So just want people to feel that actually it's happening on the lower belly. And then the next exercise that we'll do is we're gonna, I'll explain to you also. So basically, anatomically, what we have for the core, right, and for the diaphragm, for the breath, we have a anterior sling. Anterior sling, like I said, just think about this group of muscles. So you have a anterior serratus right here, then external oblique, internal oblique, and adductor right here. Same thing on this leg. So adductor, internal oblique, external oblique, and the anterior serratus. So they're separate muscles, but they're connected together. And my point is, in other words, what is so beautiful about that engagement is if I engage my adductors or the inner thigh, I'm immediately engaging my obliques. It's like a domino effect. And I'm engaging all the way up until my back. So that can happen with the bandha. So immediately my spine, so people who are practicing with bandha, you will see their posture look very beautiful, very graceful because of this engagement. So this is the other exercise that we'll do. We place a block just into our adductors. And we're gonna start breathing with Ujjayi, so we are building now. So now we're gonna engage the adductors, we're gonna start breathing with Ujjayi, and we're gonna place our hands on the lower belly one more time, right? So I don't know if we have sufficient amount of blocks.
We have asked people to bring their blocks. Yeah, we also have.
Yeah, and I have some here. So let's do that. If you need to use the restroom because you see like this is lots of lower belly, we can give you like 5 minutes break. And there are some blocks here as well.
Oh, she has some.
Below the belly. So you need to press a little bit deeper. Maybe some subcutaneous tissue is there. It's okay. Just a little bit deeper. That's why the pressure is not so light, but it's actually